Yeah, we once were called to Australia for a trial where we had to define hallucination. I forget what our definition was, but a hallucination, sorry about that, is where you are seeing things that are not visible or experienceable by the rest of the people around you. And you have forgotten that you took a drug. Now, if you are aware of the fact that what you're looking at is the result of having taken a drug, then that's not a real hallucination as far as we're concerned.
Well, I hold the term hallucination to be an improper word for this. To me,
Yeah.
the term hallucination is being aware of something that does not exist. And this had, with me, scopolamine is a good example of a true hallucinogen. And I remember one time, I think we were together, and this, oh, maybe not, maybe before we got together. This one person had taken scopolamine in the apartment I was living in Berkeley at the time. And he came out of the kitchen and walked across in front of me and into the door that led to where the piano was. And he ran right into the door. And I went over, "Are you okay?" "Oh yeah, I just was seeing where she was going." And he saw this young lady walking across the room, and he was following her to see where she's going. And she went through this door that was not open, and he went into the door. And then he backed away, and a true hallucination. You see something that was not at all there. And later on, he wanted to lie down for a while and maybe catch a little nap. He didn't catch a nap at all. He wanted to go downstairs and follow the cars that are driving by on the street and see what's going on. He did not remember any of this. When he did finally sober up enough to drive home, I found out that he had driven across the bridge, and on the other side of the Bay Bridge, where the towers are, he began talking to this fellow riding with him, who had been in medical school with him. And the fellow hopped into the back seat, and he looked in the back seat, and the fellow disappeared. Oy. So what he did, he said, "I'm going to turn up the radio a little bit." He said, "Well, turn up the radio to get the music louder." And the radio was not even on. And he realized he's not out of this hallucination thing yet. And he got into San Francisco, parked the car, and took a taxi home. And I asked him 3 weeks later, "How long did this last? When did it finally clear up?" He said, "How can you tell?" So this to me is the definition of a hallucination. With my psychedelics, you don't have this. You have the imagery, the self-interpretation, the ease of exploring things you had forgotten.
Well, wait a minute. We haven't had that because we usually don't overdose. And a part of the answer to someone else's question is how do you keep alive and healthy when you're doing this kind of research, Sasha has a way of, with a new compound, he starts at a nanogram, if necessary, as far down as you can imagine, at a point where it couldn't possibly be active. And then he gradually, over days and weeks and months, works it up so that this way you become pretty quickly aware of neurological complications or flattened emotions, anything like that. And if you get certain symptoms, either physical or mental, you quit. You don't. It doesn't go any further. Now, this kind of caution keeps us alive and well. I think that what was happening with that young man was he was probably overdosed. We've just never taken doses that large, but I think when you do, you probably have some real hallucinations. As far as the possible reality of what you're experiencing, I think sometimes we do tap into, what do you call it, concurrent or alternate realities. I'm quite sure that happens, but there's no proof of it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Other questions? Is there a woman with a question? Come on, you guys. Okay. Gentleman with the blue shirt.
I found, I have much related, but I found that some of the most impressive and challenging experiences of psychedelics are with partner, husband and wife, or girlfriends. So when you guys can comment on that, it seems like you've done a lot of these things together as a couple. How that's helped you as a couple, and how that's challenged you as a couple with experiences. Different interpretations as well. I found as a problem. Two people tripping and feeling the same space or not. How do you feel about that? How do you guys feel about that?
So the question is about the rewards and challenges of doing this sort of growth experience with your partner, with a couple, and how sometimes they're not in the same space, and of course it can be rewarding as well. What about your experience?
I think when you take psychedelics together, you become very aware of the ties you have to the other person. If there are places in your relationship that are not solid, you become aware of them. As far as sharing the same reality or the same images, that's very rare, but it can happen, and it does happen. Most of the time you find you're having quite different imagery, and that's fine. You're two different people. They don't have to be the same. The fact is, I think it's very important to recognize and accept and love the differences between you. And your trips are going to be different, but there is a certain experience, I think probably a lot of you have had, where you find yourself becoming one entity. And this happens with making love, and you find yourself not only together that way, but you are connected all over the world with other people experiencing the same thing the same way. It's a magnificent experience.
One more question, I think. The gentleman standing in the back.
Phase 3 studies for MDMA synthesized therapy on the horizon. What are some of your fears for the future generation of students in medical school as far as research in psychedelics are concerned? And if you have one piece of advice for industry to them, what would that be?
We're moving into clinical studies now, and what would your advice be? What difficulties did you think or dangers it might present to a new generation? Sorry, and opportunities? Advice?
You're going to have to repeat that question. I'm sorry.
Because MDMA is now entering into clinical trials, from safety and efficacy into actual human subjects trials, clinical work, what advice do you have for the next generation of researchers, and what difficulties might be faced? You were also asking about difficulties, weren't you? Fears about inexperienced therapists, about training, about integrating it effectively into mainstream medicine.
Sound over there.
I think inexperienced therapists or therapists who haven't done enough work on their own psyche, apart from any drug use or non-drug use, that's one of the things that I think everyone dreads. The thing about the therapists who are using and have been using MDMA with patients is all of them, as far as I know, have taken it themselves and done work on their own psyches before they give it to a patient.